All right, everybody. So we are going to be talking about our adding integers rules and kind of how to go about doing that. And then we're going to do a couple practice problems on it as well. So our rules when it comes to adding integers, if we have a positive plus another positive, our answer will stay positive. Okay. Now what happens when I have a negative plus another negative? It will stay negative. So the rule that we kind of remember for that, the rule that we stick with when doing this, is if we have the same signs being added together, a positive plus a positive, a negative plus a negative, we are going to add them and keep the sign. Okay, so again, we would add them and keep the sign. Okay, now what happens when it's a little different, when I have a positive plus a negative or a negative plus a positive? What do I do in that situation? Because you can see here, it's not always going to be the same. So what we do there is we're going to subtract the two numbers. And we are going to keep the sign of the larger absolute value number. We've talked about absolute value, right? Absolute value of -3 is 3. Absolute value of 4 is 4. Okay, so we'll look at the two numbers that we're adding together. We will find the absolute value of both of them. Whichever one has the larger absolute value is the number or is the sign that we are going to be keeping. So again, this is kind of our shortcut way to remember it. Same signs, we add and keep the sign. Different signs, we subtract and keep the larger numbers sign. So when we start looking at some examples, the first one we're going to look at is 8 plus 5. I have a positive plus a positive, which means I'm working with the same sign. So I'm going to add them. 8 plus 5 is 13, and I'm going to keep the sign. So positive 13 would be my answer. Over here in number 2, I have a negative and a negative. So again, same sign. So I'm going to add them and keep the sign. So you're going to do 80 plus 17, which is 97. And we're going to make that negative. We keep it negative since both of our numbers were negative. Down here in number 3, negative 72 plus negative 85. Again, two negative numbers, which means they're the same sign. So we're going to add and keep the sign. 72 plus 85 is going to be 157, and it stays negative. Okay? Now let's look over here at number 4. We have a negative 6, but we have a positive 10. So we're going to subtract these two numbers, the big minus the small. So we're going to do 10 minus 6. 10 minus 6 gives us 4. So the number of my answer is 4. But then I need to determine, is it positive or negative? If you look at 6 and 10, 10 is the bigger number. 10 was positive, so my answer will stay positive. Okay? Over here in number 5, we have negative 8 plus 7. Again, a negative number and a positive number. So I'm going to subtract. And when I subtract, I'm going to not look at my signs, but just do big minus small. 8 minus 7. 8 minus 7 gives me 1. So I know that my number is 1 that I want to work with. However, I need to determine, is it a positive 1 or a negative 1? If we look at negative 8, absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Absolute value of 7 is 7. 8 is the bigger of the two numbers. So we keep the sign that 8 was. 8 was negative, so my answer is negative. That's how we end up with negative 1. Over here in number 6, we have 9 plus negative 7. We have a positive number, we have a negative number. Again, we're going to do the subtraction. 9 minus 7. Okay, 9 minus 7 gives me 2. Now I need to look at the absolute values. Absolute value of 9 is 9. Absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 9 is the bigger of those two numbers, so I keep the sign of whatever 9 is. 9 is positive, so my answer will be positive. Okay, we have a couple more examples that we are going to look at. What is actually going to happen now is if you look at these 4, we are going to do one more together, and then I'm going to have you guys try a few on your own, okay? So we're going to jump and look at number 8 together. You're going to take this left to right step by step. So we're going to do -6 plus -15 first. That is a negative plus a negative. So I'm going to add and keep the sign. -6 plus -15 is going to give me -21. Bring down the +6. Now I have a negative and a positive. This is where I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So I'm going to do 21 minus 6, which gives me 15. So I know my answer is 15, but now I need to determine, is it positive 15 or negative 15? Absolute value of -21 is 21. Absolute value of 6 is 6. 21 is the bigger number, which means I want to keep the sign of that bigger number, so my answer will be negative because of that. Okay? So I want you guys solving numbers 7, 9, and 10, and then we're going to move on from there, okay? All right, so hopefully you've now answered numbers 7, 9, and 10. You can check your answers here against mine. For 7, -37. For 9, we should have ended up with 19. And for 10, we should have ended up with 1. If you are confused on any of those, this would be a really good time to pause the video so you can see all of the steps that I did and how I got down to those numbers. Moving on, the next 2 things we want to look at in here are these 2 problems, these last ones. So in this first one, we have -8 plus 8. -8 plus 8, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. But when I subtract 8 minus 8, I end up with 0. Right? And 0 can't be positive, 0 can't be negative. So that's just my answer. Now over here, 2 plus -2. Again, signs are different, so we're going to subtract. So 2 minus 2, again, will give me 0. So that's interesting. Both of those have given a 0. Now, if you look at those 2 numbers, -8 and 8, 2 and -2, you'll notice that they are opposites. And there's a special rule when we add opposites. Whenever we add 2 opposite numbers, they will always equal 0. Always, always, always. Okay? So let's move on, and now let's look at some problems for subtracting. So when we're subtracting, instead of subtracting them, we are going to go ahead and add its opposite. Okay, and then we're going to apply the adding integers rules. So if we look here at number 1, instead of 4 minus 10, we make it 4 plus -10. And now we have an addition problem that we are able to solve. Different signs, so we subtract. 10 minus 4 gives us 6. 10 is the bigger number and it's negative, so it will be -6. Let's look at one more example here in number 2. -7 minus 25. Change minus to plus a -25. Now I have the same sign, so I can go ahead and add them together and keep the sign, and it will then be -32. Okay, there are a few more problems that I'm going to have you guys try as a group or on your own, and then we will be able to go over them. Okay.